Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra Ruh, and you are listening to or watching Human Potential at Work. Today, I have one of my favorite guests that I've had many times, Doug Foresta. As a reminder, Doug is the producer of the show, and he also has his own show, and he has a very interesting background. And I'm going to let him just explain his background briefly again. But today, we are talking about two topics that are very important to me, and I imagine will be very important to you as well. We're talking about climate change and climate action and inclusion. So, Doug, welcome to the program today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And yes, just to be clear, as a, what is that word? Like a disclaimer, I am not a climate expert, but I think that the conversation that we're going to have, hopefully, if we just leave this to climate experts, nothing's going to happen. And so I just want to say that, the conversation that you and I are having today, I hope sparks more conversations about this.
I agree. And, I'm not a climate change expert, but we are all becoming a little bit more of an expert in climate change.
That's right.
And what we're not going to talk about today, we're not going to talk about, is it happening? Who created it?
Right.
We're not talking about any of that. If you're living in the world today, you probably have seen climate change. I know that
it's getting hotter
here. Yes, it's getting hotter, and it's getting wetter. It feels like it's getting wetter to me as well. I live in the country in Virginia, beautiful place, and we live on a little river, which sounds amazing, and it is amazing. But my husband and I have often called it a creek as opposed to a river. But I will tell you, when it rains in the mountains, because we're outside Richmond, Virginia, and Charlottesville, there's the mountains, the Smoky Mountains, so the big mountains for us, and the Smoky Mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains come together right there, and they're so gorgeous and spectacular. And our little creek, when it rains in the mountains, becomes a raging river and it floods. And we have 10 acres in the country, and about 3 of them are in floodplain. So you're not allowed to build. We have the 100-year floodplain. But over the last couple of years, it has flooded at least 7 times, and it has passed the 100-year mark, and it's coming up the path. And it's we have kayak and canoes and things like that, because you couldn't put a boat in there with a motor, because it's such a natural river. Sometimes it's ankle deep, sometimes it's flooding. So it's just a really interesting little river in Virginia. But just watching that and what has happened and how it's changed the fauna and the flora, and I'll tell you, the mushrooms that we had last fall, they were spectacular. Pink oyster mushrooms that we don't eat any of them because we don't know if they're
right.
But they were beautiful. I took lots of pictures and posted them on social media. The mushrooms that we got because of all the rain and all of the flooding and everything. It was really beautiful. Scary, but beautiful. And so and we are all being impacted. And once again, we're not here for the political, all of that stuff, but this is impacting people. And there are many people, including myself and others, that have disabilities. And so it is, as we all try to adjust and adapt to what is happening to our world, whether we caused it or didn't. I think that we're participating in causing it, but that's just my viewpoint. I think these topics become more and more and more powerful. So that's what we're going to talk about more today. And I know you and I have had some very interesting discussions before going on air about this topic.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things I was thinking is, well, what does this have to do with disability or accessibility, or the things we normally talk about? But one of the things that struck me was that the world is changing. Regardless, the world has gotten hotter. As you said, the world has changed, and there's no question that it appears that we're on a warming trend. And I think it's pretty clear that some of that is due to human activity. Some of that is probably not due to human activity. That's not what we're going to talk about today. But the most important thing I was thinking about is this idea that we're going to have to adapt, right? We are adapting already, and in fact, the whole idea of civilization, right, is we create a world. If people talk about the natural world, everything's all natural. I don't want to live in a world that's all natural. I mean, all natural was terrible, and that's the reason we created civilizations, is to adapt our surroundings so that we can have comfort and create a world that works for us. The problem is that us has been too narrowly defined of who
Right.
is us. And I think as we start to think about how do we increase these adaptations, how do we adapt to the world, it kind of ties to the disruption of conversation we were having previously, that as we adapt to these disruptions in the climate, we have an opportunity to create something, to build something more inclusive this time and be more mindful about actually including everyone and
Right.
really adapting that way.
And there's some very interesting things happening. I mean, there is climate action happening. There is, and are we too slow? Are we too late? Once again, we're not going to go down those paths, but it's very interesting. And it's very interesting to see how the community of people with disabilities are participating. I would say the first person that comes to my mind when I think about climate change and disabilities would be Greta Thunberg. Who, if you don't know who Greta is, you really want to do some research on this young lady. She's amazing. She started advocating for really advocating for climate action, not climate change. Not she started when she was 14 years old. Some people say she started when she was 15, so 14 or 15. She's from Sweden. She's a climate change activist. She is the young lady that actually created Climate Strike. If you're not familiar with Climate Strike, you want to be, because this is where she really encouraged her schoolmates around the world to strike, to get the adults' attention that, come on, guys, something's happening here. Let's stop arguing about whether or not there's a climate change and who created it, and
Right.
let's take action. Because, by the way, older population, you're going to die and you're leaving us with this mess. So please, let's take some action. And I just want to point this out, Doug, because I am such a fan of her work and a lot of the other young activists' work, but I did not know this one thing. I was doing a little studying before we went on air to make sure I get my facts correctly. But she got the idea from the climate strike from the United States, from our school shootings that we do.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so she got it from um, the Parkland students, Parkland, Florida. In February, when the students at Parkland High School said that they were not going to go back to school because it's not safe. So they were going to strike until the adults made schools safe for them. And that's where she got the idea. So there's been multiple strikes that have been done, but I'll just talk about the latest, which was May 24th, 2019. 125 countries participated, and there was like 2 million students that went on strike, and they do it on a Friday. Yeah, they do it on a Friday, and they strike from school. And there have been, I know there's in the news, there was some students here in the United States that did that. And then the school said they couldn't go to their senior prom because they did the strike, which I don't think is a really good idea, because these students, what they're saying to us as adults, we need to listen to. I also want to make, she's done so much, but she was nominated by multiple people for a Nobel Peace Prize. She was on Time magazine, but I do want to make a comment about what one of her teachers said. Greta's a troublemaker. She is not listening to adults. Thank you, Greta. Thank you. Because
That's
just
right.
because we're adults, it doesn't
That's
mean
right.
we know what's going on and we know how to stop these really serious, horrible problems that are actually happening. When I was going to school, Doug, I worried about a lot of stuff that I thought were serious problems at the time.
Right.
But I never worried about one of my fellow students coming in with a gun and trying to massacre us. I never worried about that. I worried about, did my hair look good today? Was my shirt tucked in properly? I remember one time, I think I mentioned this on air one time in middle school, seventh grade, I accidentally walked into the boys' bathroom tucking in my shirt from my jeans. And I didn't even realize I was busy tucking in my shirt. And I walked in and I looked up and the guy's all cracked up laughing. And I went home and I said to my mom, I'm not going back to school. I'm never going back to school. Never. She's like, yeah, whatever. You're going back to school tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's what children should have to worry about. I mean, they should worry about stupid stuff like that,
Right.
not that I'm going to make one of my students mad, my fellow students mad, and they're going to come and blow me away, or maybe it's not me anyway.
Right.
So I am so proud of the young people that are standing up and saying, "Stop it!
Right.
Listen to us. Watch what's happening. This is real." Okay, so there's actually some really really cool things happening, Doug. That where we are taking action, but there's a lot more that wants to be that needs to be done. And I know you were telling me a story about one of your friends that was in Alaska last week.
Yeah, I have a friend who just came back from Alaska, and he was saying that it was 85 degrees for days upon end. And they were telling him, they said, you don't understand how weird this is. It was record breaking. It was absolutely record breaking. There had been nothing like it in recorded history in Alaska. It should have been 58 degrees, not 85 degrees. And you could just watch. He said, the way that I said it, and I guess they said it too, was, Alaska is really the canary in the mine for all of us. It's one of the places that is getting the first impact, seeing the climate change and what it does. And you can just watch. I mean, you can literally sit there and just watch it melt in real time. So I think it's much more real than it is maybe for some of us who, like me, I live in a city in Massachusetts. I'm not watching the glaciers melt. It's very hot, but it's summer. So it's a little bit more removed from my everyday reality. But, I think that really kind of brought it home for me, the idea that, wow, I mean, it's hot in Alaska. It's 85 degrees in Alaska.
Which is really frightening. And you think
Yeah.
about, you know, what happens when those glaciers melt, and a lot of them have melted. And
Right.
then once again, you look at just my little creek river, and when the water rises, it is coming up higher every single time. Now it's not reaching my house because the way our land is built,
Right.
our land has been created. We're sitting up on a bluff, and the bluff is about I would have never measured it, but about 30 feet up or so.
Okay.
And if the water ever floods my house, there's a whole lot of people that are going to be in trouble, because there are places in Virginia. There's an island in Virginia. I'm not very far from where I am. It's a beautiful place, and it's under sea level. And often the land is underwater. It'll be underwater a couple of inches or more, and people are still living there, but it's sinking.
Yeah.
And it has been. It's been on 60 Minutes and stuff like that. And and I am from Florida. I live in Virginia now, but I was raised in Florida, and I love Florida. And I hear people saying, I'm going to go get a house on the beach in Florida. And
I wouldn't do that.
I know, well, in the first place, I'm rooted here in Virginia. We were talking about that. My support system for myself, for my husband who has dementia, for my daughter with Down syndrome, it's all here in Virginia. So I don't want to move, and I love Virginia. But at the same time, you think about, I don't know if it's hurting these people's property value, and I don't want it to hurt their property value, but I just wonder, after seeing all these hurricanes that are 5 and higher, multiple ones in our season, it's hard to ignore it. So I read a lot. I talk a lot. I post a lot about climate action, climate change. I really believe in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations has created. One of our coworkers, Lamondre Pugh, has created a podcast that's entirely focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals and the mission around that. And of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, 11 of them affect people with disabilities, because people with disabilities continue to be probably the most disenfranchised group around the world. I read an article today that hurt my heart, in that Zimbabwe continues to hide and put people with disabilities in jails.
Wow.
Continues to do this, and there's all these really really important things happening that, as you said, we have the ability, as we adapt, and humans adapt to this beautiful living earth that we're part of. We adapt all the time. And so as we adapt, um, we have the ability now to make sure that people with disabilities are included. Once again, we don't want Greta included because she has autism. I mentioned that, right? Did I mention
Yeah,
that very important point?
exactly.
I don't know if I did, but she actually has, and I'm gonna look at my notes for this. She was diagnosed with three different things. She was diagnosed with Asperger's, which is part of autism. In the United States, we don't use Asperger's anymore as a definition, but it is considered, the
Autism spectrum
part,
disorder.
the
Yeah.
spectrum that, yeah, the high level. She also has OCD, and she has something called selective mutism.
Mm.
And it's MUTISM. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that. And you know what's funny? I looked at the definition of that. Speaking only when needed. And what Greta said now is one of those moments to speak up about, stop talking about
That's
climate
beautiful.
change. Did we cause it? Is it real?
Right.
Oh my God. Have you stepped outside into nature today?
Right.
So what, thank goodness we have an activist, a young activist like Greta, who has autism
Right.
and OCD. She has a disability,
Right.
and she is not afraid to speak up to adults. I
Yeah.
remember as a kid, now I'm 60, but I remember as a kid at dinner time, my dad would always say, children are to be seen and not heard. And, my dad also was a jokester. So we were like immediately, we'd start chattering. He had a table full of children with ADHD, but he would say that a lot. If I want your opinion, I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
Right, Doug? So thank goodness that Greta, was born with autism. Maybe people need to be born with autism to take these serious problems that we have
Sure.
and adapt. Can we adapt, Doug?
That's right. I mean, nobody is better at adapting than people with disabilities because they're forced to all the time. They're just forced to. And, yeah, the thing about climate change is it's going to cause disruption on every level of society, but including migration patterns. As you were saying, we're going to have to move further inland. Lots of things are going to happen. And with that, again, comes, I just think that it's really rich when companies and people say, oh, come on, we can't bring those people with disabilities on. They're too much of a pain. I mean, we're going to have to create all of these, they're going to need this and they're going to need that. They're going to need all these special accommodations. But the whole world is an accommodation of one sort or another. It's just who do we want to accommodate?
Right, right. And yeah, who do we care about? We get that, society seems to care more about, say, somebody that has the kind of complexion that I have.
Yeah.
And we've got to stop all this nonsense. And this is what the young people are saying too.
Yeah.
Cut it out.
Yeah.
Tell me, I remember when the students of Parkland High School were on air and they were saying to us adults, why have you not done anything about this?
Right.
And it just made me so
and what's a
upset.
little crazy is,
I don't know, why haven't we done anything about
and this happens this happens every generation. But it's a little rich for the boomers, particularly, to say, well, we're not going to listen to these kids. What do they know? Go back to the '60s, and they're smoking pot and going to right. And they're
burning their bras,
burning
right.
their bras and yelling
That's
at
my
the
generation.
yelling
And
at the.
we were activists. We were
Right,
we were
that's what I mean.
advocates. We were activists. We were so engaged, and then we sort of went to sleep.
Right.
And it is time to wake the F up. It is. And I'm so tired of the corporations, blah, blah, blah. We're going to include you. We're going to do this. We're good. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. And I was really excited yesterday when I saw a group of corporations, and I'm going to only remember one of them, Johnson and Johnson, and the CEOs came out and said, we have decided we are not only going to focus on shareholder value, we're going to focus on stakeholder value. Everybody matters in these conversations. The employees matter. Yes, the bottom line matters. Your purpose matters. What you're doing, your societal impact matters. If you're trashing our earth, that matters.
Yeah.
If you're dumping waste, if you're dumping your plastic, it matters. And so I joined the young people saying, we are tired of this. We're tired of the corporations. I'm sorry. I'm really tired of the corporations not paying taxes in the United States. I'm just tired of it. So we're have such deficits, and I always try to catch corporations doing the right thing, but I have to join the young people and say, this is ridiculous. Let's stop
Right.
this. And Doug, this isn't all doom and gloom because human beings adapt. We know how to adapt. We've adapted forever.
Right. I think that's what we're saying. I think that's what we're saying in this episode is we're not saying, oh my God, the world's going to come to an end. We talked about that too. The Y2K, the
Yeah,
12
12 years left. Right.
unlike the movies where there's these climate change movies where the tsunami eats New York. It's not going to be like that. But what is going to happen is it's a disruption. It's a major disruption in our world, and with disruption comes an opportunity to build something. It destroys the old order, and is an opportunity to build something more inclusive and better. And I think that's what we're more focused on. At the same time, I would say that it really strikes me as to why we're not having more of this. Why are we so afraid of this conversation? I mean, this isn't a Republican Earth. It's not a
No,
Democratic
no.
Earth. It's not a white Earth. It's not a black Earth. It's not an Asian Earth,
It's
right?
one Earth.
It's one. And as far as we know, that we can see so far, it's the only hospitable planet that we know of. There may be
Yeah,
others, but
right.
we don't know how to get to them.
Right. And we can spend all of our time and efforts going to Mars. And by the way, I believe in all of that. Keep
Yeah.
doing all that stuff. We need to have multi-pronged things.
Yeah.
I consider myself very, very proud American, but I'm also a global citizen. I'm a global citizen, and I do not believe that we should be having conversations only at the country level, only at the local level. We need to be having conversations at the
Right.
local, the state, the national, the global level, and we need to be sharing ideas. And there's actually a group that I just love their work. It's called globalcitizen.org. And they are always producing such great content that's really helping towards climate change and climate action. And I had pulled up their website and I did a search on disabilities because I, like you, really once again believe that as this disruption happens and as we adapt, we have the ability to do it really well and make sure that we're all included. So I was just looking at some of the 239 articles that I found related to disabilities, and some of the top are the Zimbabwe one that just came out today or yesterday, saying that we're still hiding, that they're hiding and imprisoning people with disabilities. I know that when I visited Kenya, I had the host told me that, and he was a person with a disability, that there was a law on the books in Kenya that said that if a woman gave birth to a child that was an albino, that the husband had to divorce her because she cheated, which by the way is ridiculous, and she had to get rid of the baby, which
Oh God.
yeah, which is really bad. That means, putting it in the forest for the animals to eat. And it's so hard for us to understand it, but the reality in a lot of villages in Africa, and Africa, by the way, is not the only one that's doing
Right.
this.
Right.
This is happening all over the world, including in the United States. Let's not kid ourselves. People are being hidden. People are not being included just because they have a disability. And we like to think we're all developed and enlightened, and yet there's some really horrible things happening in all of our countries. But some of the positive things, for example, LeBron James just delivered Nikes. He helped design for kids with disabilities. One group is empowering people with disabilities to weather any storm. I remember, Doug, a horrible flood we had in Richmond, and a woman that used crutches got out of her vehicle, and the water swept her away, and she drowned. It could have happened even if you weren't using crutches, but she didn't have a chance using crutches.
Yeah.
There's the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, accessible toolkits for teachers in India, trying to help children with disabilities understand how to manage their periods. Barbie gets more inclusive with the help of a 13-year-old disability advocate, and she helps them create a Barbie line that includes dolls who use wheelchairs and prosthetic limbs.
Awesome.
I mean, there's just some really cool climate change climate action happening, including the climate strike, which we've talked about. And people with disabilities, young people with disabilities, and of all ages, are participating in making and adapting to our new world. They're participating. So why not use this opportunity to include us in a more empowering way now more than ever before?
There really is no more inclusive issue unless we get attacked by aliens. there really is no more inclusive issue than how do we care for the earth. I mean, call it whatever you want, but we all live here, and the problems that we're facing. I mean, the warming of the earth, and what do we do about that? Is not it's not a national. It can't be solved
Yeah.
at the consciousness of nationalism. America first, and go screw the world. Like, it doesn't work that way, right? The earth isn't going to be like, well, we're just going to keep America cool, and everybody else will just burn.
Wish they were us.
Right, exactly. So, it has to be a global consciousness. I can't think of a more inclusive issue that we all should care about than this. And
Right.
yeah,
And there are positive things happening because
definitely.
I always am reading about climate change and including people with disabilities. It's just what
Yeah,
that's just what I care about. And there's some really cool things happening. The UK Water Company is committed to planting 11 million trees. And I know Kenya has
wow.
done these pods that they
Oh,
shoot
you can throw them
through the
out, and
air. Yeah. Um, Wales just got their first electric bus, and there's electric
oh my
buses,
gosh,
everything. So, there's things that are happening. Forest animals are disappearing at a terrifying rate. Single use of plastic is happening. Canada, the United Nations, Kenya, I forget, other countries are following their lead. They're banning the use of single individual use plastics. So the one individual, the water bottle
San
or
Francisco
anything.
Airport just banned. They want it to be the first world zero emission airport. So that
Right.
you
So
will
I
not be able to buy it.
Right. And so there's a lot to be hopeful about. I know that we all care about it. How can you not care about this issue?
Right.
But at the same time, I want to keep spending time making sure that while we change and adapt, everybody gets to be included in the conversation because people with disabilities add such great value to these conversations and they're heavily engaged in them. So, what can we do to make sure they have the opportunity to find their voice and work on the purpose that makes their hearts beat more rapidly because they want so
Right.
much to make a difference? Why would we leave them out? It doesn't make any sense.
That's
So
right.
there's a lot of work to do. And once again, it doesn't matter why it was caused. I mean, it matters in that if we've been doing destructive things, we should stop. I was watching a silly movie last night. Uh, all of a sudden, I forgot the name of it. Aquaman. Yeah.
Aquaman, yeah.
And I love the ocean. I'm a big fan of the ocean. And at one point, the people living in the ocean were getting mad at the land dwellers, and so they created all these tsunamis, and they took all the trash that we've dumped into our oceans, and they threw them back onto the earth.
That's great.
They threw them into the land, and they threw our warships and our submarines back on the land, and the land people, us, were like, "Whoa, what happened?" But I thought, what would happen if the ocean just starts spitting the stuff back at us?
Right.
So it was a silly movie, but it was very colorful.
It made a good
fun
point.
to watch, and it made a good point. So we're all impacted. The world is changing. The intensity is being felt. The children feel the intensity. The suicide rates for children with disabilities are up like we've never seen it. There are children as young as 5 years old that are committing suicide. I know Doug, your wife, had done some research on that, and there's helpful videos out online which will teach children as young as 5 years old how to kill themselves. You just put a loop on your door handle, and it's chilling. We have to do a better job of including everybody, making people feel valued. This gun violence, we have to help address the fears that people are feeling. If we're feeling scared and overwhelmed, how are our children, how are the teenagers feeling? Do we take every single gun away from everybody? I think we need to focus on making people feel safe and that they have a future and that we care about their fears and we want to help them explore their fears. And sometimes when we're really afraid, the best thing we can do is feel like we're helping chip away at that problem that we're afraid of. Right? So I think we have an opportunity to really change the world for the best. And by the way, we have no choice. I believe with every single day this week, Doug, every single day, I have gotten alerts on my phone telling me that you have severe weather in your forecast, severe weather. And I know that you're experiencing severe weather in your area as well.
Yeah.
And you come up the East Coast like we do, you're a little off, but our weather comes to you.
It does.
So this is very serious. But why? So if you're not involved in climate action, then you need to be, and we need to make sure that everyone's included in saving our world. And is it that dire? I don't know. It sure seems like it might be. So I don't want to just be so afraid that I'm paralyzed in fear. I want to help, and that's what we're all about, right, Doug?
Amen. Absolutely. And I'm really glad that we can have this conversation in a way that isn't about gloom and doom in the underworld. We're all going to die because when you do that, you would just go into trauma brain and nothing good happens from there. So I think to me this is a great conversation that's productive. I don't think that we're all going to die is a good way to start any conversation about any social issue.
Right. And the children are listening, and
That's
the
right.
children are really reacting. It's really, really frightening what's happening to our children. We have got to take this serious. So anyway, we're going to end this on a positive note. There is climate action happening. If you are not familiar with the sustainable development goals that the UN has laid out and the entire world has adopted, the 17 of them, please take the time to investigate that. Listen to Lamondre Pugh's show as it comes out, but join the conversation because we need your voices, we need your minds, we need your abilities, um, and it's nothing else. It's a very exciting time to be alive. So that's what we'll hold on to, Doug. Thank you so much for being on the program again today. I love your wisdom, and you're a good mentor to me. I really appreciate you and your friendship.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Likewise, enjoy the conversation. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.